Today I'm going to be chatting with Dennis from Strictly Diesel and wanted to talk with him about a build philosophy, the way that he would approach a build to be able to maximize a budget, be able to kind of really focus in on durability, reliability. And one of the big questions is about power levels. And I find a lot of questions have come in and people might say, hey, I'm looking at the 7.3 or the 6 liter or this older Duramax or 5.9. I want 550 horsepower. I want it close to what one of the new trucks makes. So I wanted to ask him about his opinion on that. Is 500, 550 horsepower the same regardless of whether it's a 2024 or 2001 truck, and things we should take into account before we jump into a build. Before we get to it, though, I wanted to give a shout out to a couple of our sponsors that help make the Diesel Podcast possible. First is Kershaw Knives, and they have a 40% off MSRP code just for Diesel Podcast listeners. So if you use code TDP40 at kershaw.kaiusa.com, it's a great way to save some money, get some cool gear. So if you're in the market for a knife for hunting, fishing, around the job site, around the house, they've got you covered with a complete lineup to meet really any budget. You got different choices for blade steel, blade shape, different opening mechanisms. So if you're in the market, definitely make sure head on over to their website and use code TDP40 for 40% off MSRP. Also, SBI, we've had a podcast with them, got another one coming up to talk about really their bread and butter, what they've been doing for 40 years, which is building upgrades for valve trains. And they've got a complete lineup for Cummins, Duramax, Power Stroke. In our first episode, we kind of talked a bit about the company, their focus with engine builders, around not just the U.S., but North America and the world. And so if you're getting ready to jump into an engine build, whether it's something built just to get it back on the road, hold a little bit more power, something towing, or a high performance build, definitely make sure, check them out, ask your engine builder about different products, whether it's valve springs, tons of different valve train components to be able to incorporate into your build to be able to handle the extra boost, extra power, and the longevity you demand. And also stay tuned for an episode coming up with them and a really popular builder out there to be able to tackle some of the questions that we've received. All right, let's get to today's podcast with Dennis from Strictly Diesel and talking about the philosophy we should have before we jump into a truck build. Dennis, welcome back to the Diesel Podcast. How you been?
Good, man. How are you?
I'm doing pretty well, getting in the swing of summer, and I see tons of events out there and races and stuff like that. And I've always appreciated, our chats, and because I get an insight into not just power strokes, but how long you've been around diesel and different capacities of it. And it's like you've seen so many different, sides. That I wanted to chat with you about build philosophies, which I know we're going to get to in a little bit. But you have some new products, some new, carb announcements, some new things you guys have been doing. I wanted to start with that because people were really interested in the things that Strictly Diesel's producing. And anytime we have Power Stroke content up, all the Power Stroke fans come and they're really excited to hear it. So I thought we'd start there.
Well, I'm glad to hear it. We like supporting the dinosaurs still. So, we just recently, it's been probably a month now ago, got our carb approvals for our 94 to 97 regulated return, which is the piece that eliminates the OEM mechanical fuel pump and the filter in the valley, and then you've got to supply a pump, an e-fuel pump to go with that. So some people will use a Fass or an Air Dog or something like that. And then we also got carb approval on our complete e-fuel kit, which includes our regulated return, but also has our pump and filter set up. So our complete e-fuel system and our regulated return for the 94 to 97 Power Strokes is carb approved and legal for sale in California. And we also got carb approval for all three of our 99 to 03 7.3 kits, regulated return kits. So that's standard, Bold Elite, and our E-Series van regulated returns are also all now carb approved and legal for sale in California.
That's awesome. I think we chatted about it once before, but there's so many diesel truck owners in California, and to see these new products become available where they can purchase them, or the shops that work with you guys, they can, confidently purchase it. It's cool to see those older platforms be supported, and there's so much feedback that I get from listeners where, for a long time I thought, oh, people are just buying the new trucks and everything, but I find that they're picking up a second truck or a third truck, and they're getting these 94 to 03 trucks, and it's great to see the aftermarket be able to support them.
I'm afraid I don't stay super in touch with California law, but the things I hear, sounds like California is making it harder and harder to keep the older trucks registered there. I know that I think they've pushed the F450s and 550s out where you can't own older um, trucks in those lines. The 250, 350 stuff is still possible. I couldn't even apply for carb approval on a 450 or 550 platform. All my stuff is F250, 350, or excursion only. They wouldn't even let me, or the E Series van. They wouldn't even let me apply on the heavier trucks. So I think, I mean, for however long it's worth, I guess, I think California is going to eventually try to push all that stuff out and force everybody to get a newer vehicle by preventing them from registering. I don't know how soon that'll happen. It sounds like they've been doing some of that in the Class 8 world, and making life really difficult for those guys. So I would imagine pickup guys will feel that pinch eventually from them as well. They really don't want any of the older stuff if they can if they can have it that way. So
Yeah. And I think that's where, when I was thinking about chatting with you today, and I had mentioned like a build philosophy. So I'm not chatting about recipes or anything like that, but I want somebody who's listening, and even myself, because I don't have all the answers by far. How do I approach main maybe build isn't the right word, but maintaining something that's older, or getting, I get a second vehicle, or maybe it's a primary one that I just want to go back and have something simpler. You've seen this, from the very start with forums and some of the early problems with 7.3s all the way to now, and what you guys do. How do you approach the philosophy of maintaining and making or keeping something reliable that maybe older, maybe it's a 7.3, maybe it's a 6 liter? What's your philosophy on that?
well, whether it's in our shop or whether it's talking to a customer on the phone that's calling about wanting aftermarket parts, I mean, we get it all the time. Guys will want to call and talk about, wanting injectors in a tuner or, whatever. And we always back them up first and start with, okay, where are we starting from? What's our point A? What do we have for a vehicle? How many miles are on it? What do we know about it? If you're the original owner and you've put all the miles on it, then you've got all the maintenance history. You know if it's ever had a transmission replaced, or whatever has been done to it. That's one thing. If you're not the first owner, then did you get maintenance records? Do you have any idea? Has the thing ever had a trans put in it? Is it high mileage? Has an engine been put in it? We try to determine, or help them determine, or encourage them to determine what's their point A. Where are we starting from? Because that makes a big difference. If you're starting with a 500,000 mile truck and nothing's ever been done, except maybe at that kind of mileage, maybe it's had a trans put in it or something. Um, Otherwise it's just been kept running. You know, is that a truck you want to do certain things to? Is that the right one to, say, throw a set of injectors at, or whatever? And so figuring out point A's is the number one, and then making sure before you go after, say, performance stuff, making sure that you've gone after all the, is this thing just running right to begin with stuff. So, these trucks, we're talking 20 plus years old now. Um, so, everything needs to be looked at. Wiring harnesses are getting old and brittle. Gaskets and seals are leaking. I mean, the amount of things that we see in these trucks in the shop, it's increasing because they're old. Even if they're not high mileage, a 20, 25-year-old truck with 100,000 miles is still 20 or 25 years old. That silicone's that old, or that harness is that old, or whatever. And, so you have to address, is everything working the way it should be, just from a stock standpoint first? Because otherwise, then you get frustrated customers. You ship somebody injectors, you ship them, turbocharger or whatever. They do a bunch of work, not thinking anything of it. They're disturbing wiring harnesses, moving things around that haven't been unplugged and moved in a while. All of a sudden, they put it together and they've got a problem. Well, it's the damn injectors you sold me. Well, no, maybe it's a 20-year-old wiring harness that's a problem, or whatever. And so there's a lot that kind of goes toward, when you're looking at an older truck, is everything in good working order before I start doing other stuff, you know? And so that's honestly our first thing is what are we starting with? How closely has it been looked at? What condition is it in? And making sure that they understand that, this is a 20 something year old truck. You're going to take things apart and you may disturb something that isn't real happy with being disturbed, and you may have to replace parts you're not anticipating replacing because of it.
I think that point A is where it can be so hard when somebody is looking at a truck. Sometimes, a listener will reach out and they'll send a really detailed email about a truck they're looking at. And I'm sure you guys get this on the phone as well. They'll say, well, it only has 80,000 miles, or it only has 110, or only 120, because they're looking at the mileage. But if you don't know who the owner was, how hard were those 80,000 miles, those 120,000 miles? It could be, yeah, maybe worse than a truck with 200 or 220. You don't know.
How
So I
many
think,
hours idling?
yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, you got guys that park these things on a job site and let them idle and idle and idle. So it's got 100,000 miles, but it's got the hours of 300,000 miles or something on it because it sat and ran forever. Yeah, there's all kinds of things. Point A is a moving target. You can't just look at a truck and go, okay, well, you know, the paint and body look good, the seats aren't all crushed, it's got 80,000 miles or 100,000 miles. This thing's great. I mean, it doesn't tell you everything. There's still age involved, and in those 80,000 miles, not only how did they treat it, how did they service it?
yeah.
80,000 miles, but they never did a fuel filter or whatever, or barely ever did. I mean, we've seen some stuff come in the shop that was shocking. Um, I've seen, friends that own shops, where we all chat and stuff on Facebook. Some of the pictures of things that come into to shops to be worked on are, I mean, it's scary. And so you just never know how people take care of things. And of course, as soon as you go to sell something, what are you going to do? You're going to clean it up and hose it off and everything else. But that doesn't undo a terrible life of not being cared for. It just, it's like the crappy used car lot. Let's spray some shiny stuff all over everything and make it look good and get this thing to sell. And so you got to be careful, especially if you're not the original owner and you're starting with somebody else's, God only knows what they did to it, project. Certainly, the truck I bought a few years ago that's sitting in the back of the shop here, that's my project, was one of those. Looked great online. It was in Texas. I didn't go see it. I bought it sight unseen, other than the pictures. I had a few extra pictures taken and sent to me, and I got it and started getting into it and realized somebody who shouldn't have been touching anything electrical ever had been under the dash and under the hood, and I had to undo some really messed up electrical, and who knew, I mean,
Yeah. Yeah. So it's almost, even after somebody may do their due diligence and maybe they are able to get those service records, or maybe they can't and they take it to you guys or to a diesel shop and have them do an inspection and check different things. There's also kind of that unknown, which you mentioned, is these trucks are 20 to 25 years old. They weren't, I don't think, designed for a harness to last 25 years, or some of these other components. They weren't, that's not how they were made. So you look online, you look on Facebook, you look on forums or different places, and you find these recipes or these build lists or these, you should do XYZ, and you get the truck, and then there's all these kind of curveballs that are thrown at you that you might not have expected. So I think after I do my due diligence, I need to be prepared that there might be some unexpected things, or it might be a great time if I'm doing a turbo to do these other things, or I'm working on the fuel system. I can address these other problems. So it's not, there can be more to it than what somebody might suspect. And I think that's when, I'm reading things or talking with people, they say, well, I thought I just needed this, and now I've had to get 5 or 6 other things taken care of, or the transmission's starting to slip or something like that. You have to take those things into account with an older truck like we're chatting about.
yeah, I mean, a few years back, a few, probably more than that, considering how long I've been doing this. The people were picking up 6 liters a dime a dozen, because the 6 liter was determined to have been, horrible, and people were unloading them, and you could buy like immaculate, beautiful trucks, barely any miles, perfect paint and body, interiors. I mean, like new everywhere, but it had a 6 liter and the value it tanked. And so people would get rid of them and we're getting them cheap. Um, and then discovering because they didn't do their research ahead of time, oh crap, I need to spend some money on this thing. This is a 6 liter, oh, it's got a head gasket issue, or it's gonna have a head gasket issue, or whatever. And then I think people figured out, wait a minute, these things aren't as bad as everybody says. The market now has a way to make these, make good power, be reliable, everything. And then you saw the value of them come back up.
Yeah.
Um, and then with all the emissions stuff, you've seen the value of older trucks like 7.3s and even the older Dodges and Duramax. You've seen some of the values in those come back up because they've become more desirable now because they don't have the emission stuff. So now you don't have to remove things that are going to cause you problems getting registered or going through if you've got local emissions like we do or whatever. You don't have to deal with that stuff anymore. And so it's driven the values back up of the older trucks. And so now you're seeing the sale prices on some of these older trucks are kind of shocking.
Oh
And,
yeah.
and so then what you get is you get customers coming into a shop like ours or anybody like us around the country, and they've spent good money on an older truck thinking, oh, I know it's got miles, this many miles or whatever on it, but everything looks great. And, and of course the marketplace, people selling these things, will tell everybody, oh, it's a diesel, they live forever, blah, blah, blah. But it's old, you know, and so they come in and not expecting to have to put money into it. Now they've spent better money than they might have 10 years ago on the same truck because the market has pushed the value of the older trucks back up, and they still have to spend money to fix things because the truck is old, even though it may be in good shape. And yeah, that point A thing is a big deal. I mean, before you get into any kind of upgrade discussion, or if somebody's doing enough that you would call it a build or whatever, the knowledge of what point A is and what things you might have to contend with, that's a pretty important place to be. And it's worth it to pay a good shop local to wherever you're at to do an inspection and to give you as much information as they can give you about the truck. Unless we take things apart, nobody's got x-ray vision, so we can't see the clutches in the trans, or, we can't see the bearings in the motor, or, I mean, if you pay someone to get into stuff and take things apart and do compression tests and whatnot, that stuff all costs extra money. They don't have to go that far unless they have a reason. But just a really good look over the truck, because even if the engine and trans are solid, I don't care what brand of truck it is. If it wasn't cared for well, or it hasn't been done in a while, things like the front end get loose. It needs steering components, it needs shocks, it needs shit. It might have sagging springs or broken springs. I mean, we've seen a lot of stuff that's just age and use related, and you won't necessarily notice unless you really crawl around underneath it and get intimate with the truck. And a lot of guys, I think, buying trucks just don't do that. They stick their head under with a flashlight, look around, go, oh, this looks good. Everything's pretty, it's not rusty. Cool. Not having any idea, that they're thinking they're going to tow their trailer with it, but it's got broken leaf springs, and the first time they put their trailer on it, it's gonna sit on the bump stops.
Do you ever find with maybe some of these older trucks that in 2024, when people look back, they almost take on this legendary status? Like they think of this 5.9 Common Rails, the holy grail of trucks, nothing's wrong with them, or this LB7 or this 7.3. And I have not been around diesel as long as you have, but I remember when they were close to new, they had problems and there were aftermarket fixes for different parts. That hasn't gone away. But I think sometimes the perception is that they were like holy grail trucks and they didn't have any issues with them and they were just good to go off the lot, and that's not necessarily true.
No, well, and you're talking about two different facets. Well, three technically, if you're thinking about big things. There's the truck itself, and depending on the generation, and the brand. certain generations of certain brands of truck were better than others. Um, whether that was, steering and brakes or frame stiffness or, you know, some maybe more notorious for interior noise or body squeaks or whatever. And then there's the engine, again, multiple generations of engines.
Yeah.
Some were better than others. Usually the first generation of anything is problematic. Ford's first generation of common rail, the 6.4, made stupid amounts of power when you turned it up, but not known to be the most reliable thing. If you care about putting lots of miles on it and owning it for a long period of time, for example. Um, and then there's the trans. You'd have a great truck, or that had a crappy generation motor and a great trans. There's all those things because all those things change throughout the years, and so it's funny when people get the way you're talking about these things because every single brand and every single generation has had something that you would go, oh, but this was a nightmare.
Yeah.
As good as a lot of the newer Dodges have been, the 68s or the Trans is known to not be the best. For example, or I mean, obviously going into 6 liter, there weren't a lot of 5R problems, but the 6 liter motor was was notoriously problematic. The truck was great. The truck they put it in rarely had issues. I mean, Super Duty's always been a pretty solid platform. Ford did a good job with that. So it depends. That whole concept of I mean, I see it all the time online. That people just gravitate toward whatever they like. I'm a 7.3 guy, but I don't. I know they're not. I know their downfalls, and so I don't look at things that way. But you see guys that are like, oh my God, it'll go 500,000 miles and this and that, and well, maybe
Well,
maybe it won't.
yeah, it's they all have strengths and weaknesses. It's the hardest question that I ever get is somebody will say, "I'm really interested in diesel. I listened to your podcast. I just came across it. Which one would you buy?" And I can't give them an answer because I know what they want. They want power, reliability, value for their money. They don't want to have to do a lot of work to it, and it's just such a loaded question that like I can't take responsibility and tell them to buy a certain year truck and it's going to meet all those things.
Yeah, and I've had that question over the years too, and and just like when you're getting into somebody talking about a build, talking about buying something, I tend to have the same question. The first one is, what are you doing with the truck? And if it's, well, I drive 5 miles to work, drive 5 miles home, and on the weekend I needed to go to Home Depot and whatever else. Okay, you know, you're that's a different person than says, oh, I'm a hotshot guy and I'm towing cross country constantly, or I've got an 18,000 pound fifth wheel that I'm going to take my family, a couple of times a month up to the mountains in, or so what you're doing with it matters, and makes a difference in what you choose. And it makes a difference for more than just power and torque purposes. A lot of people want to gravitate toward, whatever will tow the best. But if you're putting your truck on the road like you're a hotshot driver, to me, I would have to evaluate the trucks from a comfort standpoint as well. If you're spending that many hours in the seat,
Yeah.
I'd be driving them all and going, which one can I park my butt in and tolerate the ride quality of? Because, you know, I wouldn't want to be a hotshot driver in an OBS Ford today. I don't feel like getting my kidneys beat up that badly. Um, you know, I'd probably be more interested in doing it in putting that kind of mileage and that many hours in the seat, doing it in something that's got more modern, a little bit more comfortable suspension, maybe coil spring stuff. If you don't need four-wheel drive, two-wheel drive with coils up front can tend to ride better, that type of thing. You have to look at all those facets, what you're doing with. I mean, if you don't spend a lot of seat time in it, or if there's a little bit here or there, then get the truck that's going to do the best for you. If you're an off-road guy, maybe you want live axles front and rear and you don't want independent front suspension. Okay, well, that's important to look at. Um, if you're going to go do, crazy off-road stuff and put, expensive lift kits and you want, big travel and all, I mean, there's all kinds of pieces of that puzzle to evaluate. And just like doing a build for someone who calls and says, hey, I want to, I want to hot rod my 7.3 and I need injectors and turbo and blah. Okay, what are you doing with it? Let's start with how you're using it, and let's make sure that we do this in a manner that has something to do with how you're using the truck. We're not going to go make you 800 horsepower when you're pulling, 5 horses all around the country that are worth $1 million or some crazy like that wouldn't make sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you
So the
think
same
that,
thing.
do you think managing those expectations of a customer is maybe one of the toughest things? And I'm going to add a little bit to that question. As we mentioned, some of these trucks take on this legendary status. Well, also power and torque numbers have as well, where they come with close to 500 horsepower, 1,200 foot-pounds of torque. Maybe somebody had one of these newer ones, and they think, well, okay, I want to get this 7.3. I want it to make 550 horsepower, or I want this. We could name any truck that we want to. But the expectation of 550 horsepower or 600 horsepower in a 7.3 is going to be different than a brand new 2024 F250 where you have, say, an emissions compliant tune on it that's already right there. They feel totally different and the truck handles it different. So is that a difficult kind of expectation to manage as a
It can be because because people have an expectation that 500 horsepower is 500 horsepower, and it's not. I mean, how that power is delivered is important. Modern common rail engines have the ability to inject enough fuel in a very short injection window to make that kind of power. Um, and that short injection window keeps them from having to run crazy advanced timing. It helps control exhaust temperatures. They've got the new injectors are fast enough to do multiple injection events, so they've got pilot injection and it helps it run quieter. They can make that kind of power without doing it the way we have to do it in say an older engine, which is going to involve more timing, larger nozzles, everything else, and those things tend to lead toward potentially too much timing, depending. At the very least, usually smoke output, EGT issues. The older stuff just can't deliver the amount of power the same way as a modern common rail, high pressure common rail engine can. And then let's couple that with as much as I think some of the older transmissions in some of the older trucks are far more stout. Uh, um, the newer trucks have more gear ratios. So now you're getting into 6-speed trucks, you're getting into 10-speed trucks. So they've got more electronics. They can keep the motor in the sweet spot where they want to keep it under different situations. So you've got modern injection speed and pressures, and you've got much more advanced electronic engine controls, and you've got more gears to choose from, and more electronic management there. You can't duplicate that in a 7.3 liter with a 4-speed and have it come out the same. And I'm sure there's plenty of people on the internet that are going to argue, oh my God, I've got 650 horsepower and I tow with it just fine. Some people do it. Some people do it because they know how to drive the truck, um, and they understand what they're dealing with, and they know how to put it in the right RPM band to pull a load that probably is really too much for the amount of power they're making. You give that to the average guy that doesn't know any better, he's gonna point it up a hill and mat the gas and wonder why he melted the thing down. Um, we run into that fairly regular as well, where people just don't necessarily drive the truck the way it needs to be driven. Um, and then they go and they add a bunch of horsepower and everything else and then have problems with it, or wonder why their EGTs are through the roof, or why they're getting harassed for smoking out 4 lanes of traffic for a half a mile behind them or whatever, trying to pull a hill. So no, they're definitely not the same. The modern technology has certainly uh, made significant advancements in the ability to make power cleanly and make the trucks tow really well. My 17 F450 was an amazing towing vehicle, and that was emissions on mild 50 horse tune with a little bit of trans adjustment, and that was it.
Common question we get from you guys a lot is, hey, I need a diesel engine. I either, I can't wait this long to get one, or normal place I get stuff from it just takes too long, or they don't have the parts in it that I need. Maybe my truck's not stock, or I tow heavy with it. I don't want to go back with just a stock engine. DFC Diesel is a sponsor of the podcast. We worked with them, hand in hand on doing episodes, answering technical questions. They have a complete lineup of Cummins, Duramax, and Power Stroke remanufactured engines that are set to a standard of ISO 9001 2015 standards, which is a huge deal in the aftermarket. And there's certain levels of quality testing, validation that are required for that. So when you get one of those engines, the type of quality that's built behind it with an industry-leading warranty that's really comprehensive. And the other thing with that is sometimes the options that are out there, it's a basic OEM engine. You want a little bit more. You don't want to have the same failure again. So there's a bunch of different series of engines that they have, from core, street, tow haul, and also the Speed of Air series, which we've covered on the podcast before. There's a lot of really cool benefits to it. And if you have questions about that, reach out to them. If you don't know the type of engine that you're looking for, if you go to dfcdiesel.com, there's a ton of info there. You can send an email or you can reach out to them. Also, they're working with Speed of Air pistons, which it's the only piston that pays for itself. And there's a lot of really cool technology behind it. So you can add that into your build and be able to get better fuel economy, increase power, increase torque, and better engine life out of it. Some of the most common engine applications or series of engines that they have with that lead time, a lot of them are in stock or they have really short lead times. So you can check your favorite retailer or go to dfcdiesel.com, check them out, see what's in stock, see what you can get. If you have questions, maybe you want to do something that's outside of the normal series of engines, they have tons of choices for rods, cranks, pistons, valve train upgrades, tons of different things. So if you're in the market, definitely make sure and head on over and check them out. And also the safety guards that are built into the new ones as well, just how integrated everything is electronically and to keep them in that kind of safe zone. Whereas I think back to the old trucks, like you had to put gauges on until they came out with electronic monitors, and then you had to pay attention to it. And you had, like when you mentioned EGTs, do they even have an EGT gauge? Do they know what it's doing? Do they know what they're, some of these other things that are going on versus, a new one, it'll start to defuel. It'll start to do, things to protect that truck. So, I see this trend that's been going on for a while of, I want to get an older truck. I want something simple. I found that it's really difficult to take what we expect as consumers and truck owners in 2024 and just be able to universally apply it to something from 2002 or 1994 or any of these year ranges, because they're so vastly different with how you operate them, how you get similar power levels out of them, what you need to upgrade at different points of it. It can definitely be tricky for somebody out there. That's why I thought it'd be great to have this conversation with you, because you've seen so much of it. I wanted to kind of pivot the questions I had for you just a little bit, because it's Strictly Diesel. What you do, you're looking at all this market data, you're looking at all this feedback of customers, people in the industry, what's going on. When you're thinking about the second owner, the sixth owner, the fifth owner that's getting into a 7.3 or 6 liter or any truck that's out there, how difficult or easy is it, or what kind of challenges do you have to say this is a product people are going to need to fix, maintain their truck? Let's tackle this. Let's jump into designing this, figuring it out. People are going to need this, due to mileage, power, whatever it might be. How does it work from a manufacturing and design standpoint to accommodate these people who are buying these older trucks or wanting to make things, make their truck more reliable?
Well, I mean, we're always looking for those ideas. We're looking for those unfulfilled parts of the market. But honestly, 20 something years later, I'm sure there's still stuff left, but there's an awful lot that's been addressed in the market and in the common areas of problems. So it's not like that's a day-to-day thing for us of, oh, here's a new idea or whatever, just because we're also not one to do something somebody else has done. you know. So there's still a handful of people in the market that are focused on the old dinosaurs like we are, the 7.3s, the 6.0s. You know, same in the Dodge and GM world. There's still people that are looking at and doing product for the older trucks. Um, I think the amount of really new stuff coming for those is probably slowing down, except for maybe, I don't want to call it frivolous. I don't know what word to use. Maybe items that are more want versus need. You know, a good example would be uh, billet valve covers for a 7.3 liter. There's no need. You don't need that to keep the truck alive. You can still buy OEM ones. You can sandblast and powder coat and reuse OEM ones. You know, there's all kinds of ways of accomplishing that and spending less money. You know, and that wouldn't be something we would look at doing, because we would just look at it and go, the cost is too high. There's no benefit. It's cool if you're building a showpiece to have stuff like that, but just not the kind of thing we do. So we focus on, is something a need in the market, either from a day-to-day daily driver normal average truck use perspective, or from a high performance perspective. Is there something we've thought of that would be beneficial to somebody doing performance work, um, that nobody's done yet in the market, and then we might look at that. And the same goes, I mean, because we've got trucks in and out of the shop all day long, we're looking at GMs and we're looking at Dodges, and we're looking at all the platforms for something that, you know where there's a need that we can fill, that somebody else hasn't already done. But it's sometimes you kick yourself and you go, God, I wish I'd have thought of that, when you see somebody come up with something. I mean, that's almost a regular thing, because there's some smart people in this business, and they have some really good ideas. Other times you kind of shake your head when people do some stuff. You're like, God, is anybody going to buy that? It's astronomically expensive, or it's a showpiece only type thing, or whatever. Um, and I mean, there have definitely been things we've talked about doing and just said, no, we're not going to do that. Way too much money. Nobody's going to spend that on this platform, whatever it might be. And so I don't know if it really answers your question or not. I mean, it's just kind of an ongoing, we're a shop that we solve problems in the shop all day long. There's trucks that come in for diagnosis and issues, and a lot of the things we deal with, there's already a known repair, but if we come across something that is an opportunity, then we're certainly, willing to look and decide, is that something that that's truly an opportunity for us, or is it an opportunity for somebody else, in case it's not a capability we have.
It definitely answered the question and then made me think of more questions. As far as feedback that you get from customers, do you find that they are asking for solutions to problems on some of the newer trucks, like some of the kind of the life cycle of, we think of an LML, or we think of the early 6.7 Power Strokes? Well, they've been out for 10 plus years now. Are they looking towards new ones, or is it kind of focused everywhere, or what kind of experience have you guys had with what people are asking you guys for?
I mean, the people that are calling us are probably heavily Ford geared, just because that's what we're known for. Um, we're in terms of our aftermarket, we have some Dodge and we have some GM stuff, but I'd say 95% of our aftermarket product that's under our brand is Ford, and so the calls we get are primarily Ford based. Um, and I would imagine most of the people, looking for solutions to certain issues for, GMs and Dodges are calling, you know, the other guys, they're calling like Merchant for GM stuff, or Duramax Store. They're calling, any one of these guys that they know specializes in whatever that particular platform is. On the newer stuff, even in Fords, I mean, we may get some calls here or there. um, Probably, I would say, if people are calling us, not bringing us a vehicle, they're probably more likely to be local on newer stuff, just because they're calling somebody local. Because nationally, like on 6.7 stuff, you've got guys out there like SPE that have been doing tons and tons of 6.7 work. So I don't know that we necessarily get some of the calls on the newer stuff just because it's not what we're known for. And that doesn't mean we're not looking for opportunities to do things. I mean, years ago, we were one of the earliest to produce a replacement oil pan for the 6.7 Fords, and then the market got flooded and we quit making it. But for a while, we made a bunch of those things, and they did really well for us. If I come across another opportunity for something that's not going to get me in trouble with the three-letter organizations and is legal and whatever else, certainly I would take that opportunity. Like I said, a lot of times we find those issues on a truck in the shop and somebody's already solved the issue.
For a younger person out there they're passionate about diesel trucks, they have the skill, they know that this is an industry or something that they want to work in. I was thinking about what you just said with kind of where you guys focus. And they're looking for guidance because they see all these brands, all these engines, all these things, and they try to be kind of something for everyone. And you try to service all these year ranges. Would you tell somebody who's younger that's thinking about building a career in diesel to maybe focus in on a platform they're passionate about, or focus in on some year ranges, or does it not matter and you could just kind of gravitate towards everything, or what kind of advice would you give someone like that?
Well, are we talking somebody that's trying to open a business? Or are we talking a mechanic? Or, I mean, I guess it kind of depends on the position.
I would say from a business perspective, like say somebody wants to, they want to have a diesel shop, but they also want to grow it. They want to be known regionally or nationally. Should they focus on servicing every year range truck, or trying to design products for every year range truck that's out there, or should they find a specialty like you'd mentioned, like Merchant Automotive for DMAX stuff, or I think Strictly Diesel, I think Power Strokes. And so I can think of these national brands where if I had one of these engines or one of these trucks, this is where I would go. Because I've had some listeners ask me, like, how do I approach this? Do I open this diesel shop, service everything, build a website, load 30,000 products on it and try to sell it all? Or should I focus in on, I really love 6 liters, or I really love 7.3s, or I really love 6.7 Power Strokes, and just kind of build my business with that focus?
Well, I think if you're coming into it immediately thinking that your goal is to be somehow nationally known in a hurry, you better be coming into it with an awful lot of money. If you're a small guy trying to start a little shop somewhere, I think your best bet is to focus on what you know the best, and then grow from there. Doing as much work as you can on what you know the best, which obviously brings dollars into the business and keeps you there, keeps you, earning a living. Um, Somebody coming into this today, well, we may have talked about this on a previous podcast. When the industry went through the the period of lots and lots of delete stuff available everywhere, uh, there was a massive influx of new shops. I mean, diesel shops were popping up like weeds, and it was because basically the only thing you needed was a tax ID and a wholesale account, and you could buy delete tuners and delete pipes and call yourself a diesel shop. And then as that has faded out because of all the EPA and everything else, I think some of those have gone away, and some of them have been forced to change their business model and work on everything and do service and repair and do things that weren't the easy money that stuff was for those periods of time.
Yeah.
And I don't know that anything exists in this industry today that's like that. I don't think anybody opening a shop today has access to anything that sells as quickly and as easily for as much profit as that stuff did at that time. And so I don't know that you're going to see shops popping up today like that. unless they're not interested in sticking around. They may be popping up because you know, they've got access to that stuff and they're willing to be around for a little while and then disappear before they get in trouble or something. I don't know how that stuff is working these days, but that's not a way to build any kind of a long-term business. I think somebody coming into this market today looking to do something long term is probably going to need to plan on putting a lot of work in. Um, and and I don't think anybody's coming into this business unless they're coming in with a lot of money that they can just throw at things like, you know, UCC trucks and massive amounts of advertising and everything else in a short period of time. That's not how most people operate. So I don't know. I think my advice to somebody getting in this business is if you know something specific, let's say you're a Cummins guy, then focus on that and build your business around what you know and be good at it and treat your customers right and do everything the right way and then grow from there. Expand your knowledge and then expand what you work on. Expand your knowledge and expand what you work on. And if you do that and you're treating people fairly and you're running the business in a way that will allow the business to survive, because a lot of people don't understand the business aspect of running a shop. They understand fixing trucks, but they don't take the time to learn how to run a business, and they find themselves working 60, 70 hours a week and not making ends meet and barely paying their rent, maybe not taking a paycheck to pay employees, all kinds of things that people who don't have a business understanding do. Don't go down that road. Either find somebody that can help you understand how to run a business, do things the right way, and then grow from there. There's nothing generally good about extremely rapid growth. um, it usually, I don't think, happens for the right reasons, and you have to question why certain things grow extremely fast. Back in the day, the extremely rapid growth was due to extremely profitable but highly illegal products. Today, I don't know that we have that opportunity. You better kind of get in it for the long haul and be patient and willing to put the work in.
That's it's really insightful because a lot of that I don't know. I was never a mechanic. I never, built a brick and mortar from, working on trucks and building that base and all that stuff. And so I like to ask, leaders and successful people whenever I'm doing podcasts, those kind of questions, because you guys have done it in your respective fields with your respective businesses, and it can save, somebody some time or maybe help them, hone in on it. And I just think that it's going to be so important to the future of diesel and aftermarket, whether it's repair, whether it's manufacturing, whether it's new product design, is some of the knowledge and the experience you guys have gained over the years building this and all the different trends you've seen and the businesses that come and go and all that sort of stuff. That kind of experience can really help somebody that's younger out there that wants to do it. And I know from conversations with business owners, they're wanting people to be interested in it. They're struggling in some ways to find good help. It's just such a different climate now than it was 10 or 15 or 20 years ago to be able to do this. So I like to be able to just have insights and experience to be able to tell someone who's younger that wants to do this, hey, listen to this conversation that we had, and this is somebody that's successful and done this. So I think that can give them some things to think about. And the business thing you mentioned, I've heard that so many times about diagnosing a truck, fixing it, keeping your customers happy is vastly different than the business side with the money and the taxes and the space and the growth and how fast. You don't want to grow too fast, but you also have things you got to pay for, and that's probably a whole podcast by itself. But I
It
know
probably
how.
is. And I mean, as an example, a month or so ago, um, I attended the they called it the 7.3 liter summit that was put on by Full Force Diesel and PHP and KC Turbos, and it was a fairly small gathering, first year, but a good portion of that was spent. They had arranged some very good speakers, uh, to talk to the people that showed up, because it was all shop owners basically that showed up, people in the business, to talk to them about different aspects of the business, whether it was marketing, whether it was how to use AI to help your business. I think they had people talking about different approaches, even like to how we started this conversation, talking about how you might approach selling a project build to a customer. You know, and a number of the discussions even then grew into side discussions, when there weren't sessions going on, of people standing around talking about the business aspect of running one of these shops, and the things that that people need to do in order to stay alive in this business, and so that you can pay your employees, and I mean, people don't understand the number of expenses that a shop has. Just things like insurance can get astronomical, and in some cases can be very difficult to get. I've seen numerous shops or shop owners ask about insurance companies because whoever they've been having provide their general liability insurance decided, we don't want to cover automotive shops anymore. So when your next renewal comes up, you're going to have to find somebody else. We're not going to do it. You're getting dropped. And it's not that they did anything wrong. It's that an insurance company made a business decision to no longer do that. It happened to us a few years back. We were with an extremely large, very well-known insurance company, and they dropped everything diesel. And what they were dropping was class 8 work. They didn't want to do heavy duty truck work. But the fact that we had diesel in our name, we got included in this sweep of getting dropped. And we tried to argue with them about it. You guys are still covering regular automotive shops. Yeah. Okay, we're a regular automotive shop. Work on pickup trucks. There's no 18 wheelers here. We don't do class 8 work. No, sorry. And so we had to go find a new insurance company. So not only is this stuff a pain in the neck, it's astronomically expensive. And then if you're making product, if you're smart and you're making product and you're putting your brand name on it and whatever, then you better be carrying product liability insurance. Well, that's even more expensive, and an even bigger pain to get and keep and carry. And so there's aspects of the business that people just don't necessarily talk about. They're like, oh, I have an idea, I'm going to go make this thing, or I'm going to soup up trucks, and but there's so many pieces of the business side puzzle that people don't get. And so we had some of those discussions at the 7.3 liter summit, and then like 2 weeks after that, Thoroughbred Diesel did their event. I'm going to get the name wrong, I'm sure. I think they call it Survive or Thrive. I may be getting that backwards, but something along those lines. Thoroughbred's done it for a couple of years now, and that's the same deal. Customers of theirs that buy from them are basically invited to sign up and attend, and it's a couple of day workshop on all different facets of how to run a business, not how to fix a truck, because you already probably know how to do that, but how do you market yourself? How do you hire? How do you design a pay plan for different types of employees? How do you get and retain good people? Because they've all gotten much more expensive. And so there's so many aspects of running a business that people don't think of. They think I can fix a truck. I can fix a truck better than my boss, so I'm going to quit and go start my own business. But they don't know what they're in for. And
Yeah.
so, there's definitely stuff to think about if you're going to go do that. And there's definitely help to be had out there. Um, you know, either advice from friends in the industry. A bunch of us shop owners talk about this stuff somewhat regularly, and we'll call each other and ask, "Hey, what would you do in this situation?" So network and make friends. But there's also professional organizations, and we used one years ago for, I don't know, 3 or 4 or 5 years. And because there were so many aspects of the business end of it that we just never thought of, and so we attended, we flew out and attended training, and we did weekly coaching calls, and we've done all this stuff because we want to be here, because we want, our customers to know that when we say we have a warranty on X,
Yeah.
we're going to be here a year from now, 2 years from now, 5 years from now, if that's what it is, or whatever. We want to run this business in such a way that it's still going to be here.
Yeah. That's great advice. I had chatted with PHP about the 7.3 Summit a couple times, and I wanted to go. I just couldn't make it work with my schedule, but I was really excited to hear about the collaboration and what the whole basis of it was. And I think, it's got me excited, as somebody who's into diesel, covers it, talks about it, to see this networking, this collaboration that's out there. And I think that's another great point for somebody who's thinking about doing this is you might fix trucks, great. I'm able to do all this stuff, but there's this whole other world that, you guys tell me about that's out there that you got to take into account if you want to, be around. And I think, this conversation, I know it started with build philosophy and then transitioned, to this side of it, was really insightful, and people can listen to it, they can watch it, and whether they're buying a truck or they're thinking about getting into diesel or they want to know, what are some things coming up that I can put on my 7.3, there's so much, I guess, insight that's there to make good decisions so you're not wasting money. So you're happy with your purchase. So you enjoy this truck. So your customers enjoy it. So I appreciate you going through that, with me and sharing your experiences and insights into how to build a truck, how to build a business, and all the things you guys are working on at Strictly Diesel.
Well, and kind of coming back around to the build philosophy thing, because we did kind of get sidetracked off of that. I think it's important, and I've tried to teach all my staff to do the same thing. The question that we ask, and the question I hope the customers ask is what am I doing with this truck? And you need to put that down as a prioritized list. And if you find that the things at the top of your list include I'm hauling my kids back and forth to school, I'm putting my family in this thing and I'm towing a travel trailer, anything that involves reliability over performance, then you have to make build decisions that emphasize reliability over performance. So that doesn't mean you can't turn up the horsepower. That doesn't mean you can't take your 7.3 and make it a 400 or 450 horse truck, but you need to think about it. You need to think about, is this a forged rod motor or a powdered metal rod motor? Does it have too many miles on it to put this big of an injector on without doing a rebuild? Am I going to risk, some problem? Do I want to get stranded with my family because I've put parts on this that if I have a failure can't be easily replaced by something I can get at the auto parts store? Um, there's ways of doing performance builds that give you more power, give you more torque, give you some fun out of the truck, but they keep you in a situation where you're not doing things that where you have to be white knuckle gripping the steering wheel and staring at your edge monitor for every mile you tow your trailer. And if that's not the case and you're doing a performance build, if it's a weekend toy, then go crazy. But you have to ask yourself, what's truly do I need this truck to do? What are the things, and write them down and look at them and put them in an order that makes sense. And if all the crap at the top of your list is reliability based, then you need to build around that. And I've tried to beat that into my staff, and I've had that conversation with customers, and I mean I've talked people out of buying things. uh there have been times I've talked them out of buying from us at all because what they called us asking for didn't make any sense, and I didn't have the right option, or they were undecided at the time. I could have just said, sure, I'll sell you whatever you want, but I don't want the phone call later, of, well, I bought all this stuff from you, and now, you know, I've got a windowed block and parts strewn all over the driveway and everything. Well, I gave you what you wanted, but I don't think that's the right answer. I think sometimes people don't necessarily know what they want, and they need a little guidance as to, okay, that's great. We'd all love to have, a 600 horsepower daily driver. That'd be super fun, but does it make sense?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. And I think that's where the reputation and the integrity really shine, because you've probably seen it play out over the years where there was a place that sold somebody all the things, it windowed the block. Now they're upset. Now they're saying, this place A that I bought from, destroyed my truck, destroyed my engine, whatever it might be. And it's, sometimes better just to say, I can't sell you this, or, let's look at exactly what we're, what you're wanting to do with the truck and meeting those expectations. So I appreciate your insights on it, Dennis. And, I think it's definitely going to help a lot of people, when they're thinking about these older trucks or newer ones or just whatever they're doing. It applies to all the makes and all the models that are out there, as the different, stages that you went through and highlighted. So I appreciate your time today.
Not a problem. I'm glad to be here.
Don't forget, diesel fans, make sure and head on over to kershaw.kaiusa.com. Use code TDP40 for 40% off at MSRP. It's a great way to save some money and get some really cool gear if you're in the market for a new knife. They've got a bunch of choices for blade steel, blade shape, opening mechanisms, different handle designs, and a bunch of different choices depending on your budget, what you may need. They've had a bunch of new releases in 2024. So if you head on over their website, check them out. Make sure and use code TDP40 and get 40% off MSRP. Also, SBI, we appreciate their support on the podcast. They've been manufacturing valve train component upgrades for over 40 years. They've got a heavy focus on Cummins Duramax and Power Stroke components, and they work extremely close with engine builders, all across the country, all across North America, so they can really focus in on what either truck owners are needing, whether it's for towing, hauling, engine rebuilds, or the high performance market. So if you got an engine build coming up, definitely make sure and chat with your engine builder about what kind of valve train components that they're using, and head on over to their website, check them out, see what they've got. They're more than happy to answer questions and be able to make sure that you get the right components that you need for your build without overspending or overdoing it, so that you're happy with the price, happy with the performance, and the reliability. Also want to give a shout out to some of our Patreon supporters: Tyler Loewen at 23 Diesel, CUTTERUP Rob, J Cole, Colby. We appreciate all their support, and all of our other Patreon supporters. All of you who subscribe on YouTube podcast apps, follow us on social media. We appreciate all your support here in year 8 of the Diesel Podcast, and look forward to bringing you more of the content that you guys want to hear in 2024. Until next time, keep the shiny side up.